You have a school doing the Prepare, Purpose, Process, Empowered School program. That's awesome. They do it. But if you're a parent and you would like your kids their brains to be ready to learn in the morning, then have them get a drink of water and do a little exercise.
Well, welcome to the Generation Youth Podcast. I'm the host, James McLamb. If you wandered on here and don't know who I am, that's it. And I'm here with a good friend who was one of the presenters on this past summer 24, if you're watching in the future, Igniting the Next Generation Summit. My good friend, Trish. How are you doing today, Trish?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. This is so fun. Oh my gosh, the Ignite event was so much fun. We met such great people and amazing information and tools you can use right now. That was really fun.
And I loved your presentation. We'll jump into some of that today. My wife did as well, because when she found out who I was interviewing today, she was like, oh, I've got that written down. I'm going to be using some of that as what I do. She teaches preschool music.
You can
she's just like
definitely use that in preschool. So I've taught all the grades from preschool all the way through 6th and a little bit of 7th. So I've been preschool all the way through middle school. I've run youth groups, high school youth groups and stuff like that, but I haven't actually taught high school.
Well, I tell you what, our audience would love to hear about you. They get tired of James talking all the time, so they'd love to hear a little bit about you. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple minutes and introduce yourself to the Generation Youth audience, and then we can dive into some of this stuff and how it can be applicable to both parents, teachers, coaches, just everybody, and the principles that drove you to create it.
Well, so here's the thing. The things that I do are brain-friendly things. So my name is Patricia Wilkinson, but I go by Trish. And how all this started was I had children who had challenges. They were neurodivergent, and they had attention issues and auditory processing problems and anxiety and, just a bunch of stuff that my husband and I did not see, that when we got together between our two families, that these things were going to accumulate in our children. I mean, you just never know. And they're wonderful humans. But here I had been teaching already probably 8 years, maybe, by the time we had our first child. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have this wired. I mean, kids are my thing. They're my wheelhouse, right? So I thought, oh, I'm going to be great at this parenting thing. This is going to be so fun. And then I ended up with these kids who had challenges. And I was actually good with other people's kids who had challenges, but I felt like I was failing my own. Absolutely.
Are you inside my head? Because I could have said that exactly the same thing.
Right? Isn't it different working with other people's children than your own kids, right?
Teaching and coaching. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, because I've taught for many, many years. I've been a parent coach pretty much since Brain Stages came out. And it came out in December of 2018. So my family were the ones that said, you know what, Mom, and my husband too, you need to write a book. So I wrote this grade by grade guide through elementary school, kindergarten through 5th grade, called Brain Stages: How to Raise Smart, Confident Kids and Have Fun Doing It. And because I really believe that raising children should be fun. Educating children should be fun. When I first started teaching, not to sound obnoxious, but I was that guy who was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're paying me for this. And then, I had these difficult kids. My own children were difficult. So I just felt like I was failing them. And I went on a quest to figure it out. So I talked to neurologists and psychologists and their pediatrician, and I read books and articles and research studies. And I mean, just talk about a science nerd. I'm still a science nerd. I still get all the latest stuff from Google Alerts that's coming out in the latest research on what we're finding out about how brains develop, function, and learn. And some of these things we've known for quite a while now. Some of these things are almost brand new. And basically what happened was, at the same time I was trying to figure out how to help my kids and doing all this trial and error, which they were such good sports because, some of the errors were right. But we did manage to find things that help them develop confidence and, and develop skills and tools to be able to function within how their brains functioned, and that they weren't deficient, nor were they disordered. because we call kids with attention issues, they have ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and their brains just work differently. So when I could
Yeah.
work with them in accordance with how their brains worked, oh my gosh, the miracles started happening. They just took off. They did much better socially. They took off academically. In fact, my younger daughter graduated valedictorian in an international baccalaureate program in high school.
Mhm.
Which,
Wow.
if you'd have seen this poor little girl who, wet her pants all the time and had to run, we had regular changes of clothes for her at the elementary school where I taught. So it was like, Trish, what are you doing with these kids that they have, these serious issues? And I was like, I swear. So that
I
was
know.
part of, I felt like my children were suffering, and my older daughter had trouble with her teachers. So I felt like they were suffering. Well, around about the same time, and I'm starting to find things that are working, and the kids are kind of getting into a groove and they're coming into their own. And at the same time, I had this fourth grade class that I was just like, oh, I don't even know how I'm going to get through the day or the week. How am I going to get through this year? So I started plugging in the things that I was doing with our kids to help them with their homework and develop their confidence and all that kind of stuff in my classroom. And now they're doing a lot more social and emotional learning, which gets a bad name because, people equate that with gender norming and all that. But basically, social and emotional learning is just learning communication skills and recognizing our emotions and how to deal with them in a positive way instead of just blowing up and hitting somebody or shutting down and or running away, fight, flight, or freeze. So, but basically, what happened was I set up these few things that I did in my classroom to prepare my kids' brains for learning. And so we did 10 minutes of exercise, got a drink of water, and parents will say, how much water? I don't know, an 8-ounce glass, but it's not exact. Have them, one of those cups next to the sink in the bathroom or whatever, and have them just drink a cup of water first thing in the morning, because we all wake up dehydrated. Our brains are like 73% water, so you can't think very well. I like to say it's like riding a bike on flat tires, right? So we just got in the habit of drinking a glass of water in the morning. We had fewer headaches, we had less grumpiness in the morning. I mean, all kinds of things started happening just from drinking a blasted glass of water.
Wow.
And then we started doing some exercise in the morning, and jump roping is great. And they would just jump rope, count to 100. They could miss 25 times. It didn't matter, but they would just get their, and here's the funny thing too about that. I love this story. So I don't have the science on this, but I always had my kids in my classroom jump rope, because that kind of bounce in
Yeah.
between when you're jumping, it does something to connect neural pathways in the brain. So when I'm
Really?
studying to write brain stages, because Jacqueline Frischnecht, PhD, and I were supposed to write it together. So we got a lot of our notes together and all. Anyway, she ended up passing away. So I
Mm.
ended up writing the rest of the book by myself and having to really, like, I had already been a science nerd, but then I had to really delve into the science and how big were the study groups and just all of that stuff that you do when you're studying research. So I got much better at it. But the bottom line is, one of the things I found out is the hippocampus is a big shot in the brain for learning, right? The long-term memory.
Yeah.
But right next to it is this little guy called the caudate nucleus. And the caudate nucleus manages short-term memory and movement. So when the
Oh.
kids so my theory is, and it hasn't been proven, but my theory is that when they can do things in rhythm, like jumping rope, my kids would get better at reading, things would start clicking in math. I made sure no matter what grade I was teaching that my kids could jump rope with that middle, that middle jump, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And when they could jump rope and they were comfortable with that rhythm, I started noticing a lot of other things are coming together. Their reading is getting better. Their math is getting better. And I taught first grade for 5 years. And when I was teaching first grade, I was doing that all the time with my first graders. And I thought, I'm going to see if these second graders, because I kept changing grades, I'm going to see if these second graders can jump rope. And sure enough, a lot of the kids who were having trouble reading and writing, and they were a little slower on the uptake, couldn't jump rope yet. they started doing better. So I'm just telling you about my own experience.
Yeah, it makes me wonder as education has progressed, and I'm doing the quote fingers if you're not watching. We have diminished physical activity, especially in not just in high school, but in elementary as well. We don't spend as much time outside. We don't spend as much time, engaging in those activities because we need that time to be academically learning. And yet our scores and the outcomes of it seem to have diminished.
Although that's changing. That's a really exciting thing, James. That's changing because in government and whatnot, in the last couple of administrations or whatever, they've emphasized not only nutrition, but also exercise. So schools are getting
Hmm.
grants to make sure that kids are doing a certain amount of exercise in the morning. I was just talking to somebody in Seattle that they're talking about doing my prepare purpose process program at their
Yeah.
little district in the on this island off Seattle, and she was saying, "Oh yeah, that would be great for us because we're already doing physical activity in the morning because we have a grant from the government to make sure that the kids do, so for equipment and whatever to make sure the kids are doing exercise in the morning." So that's becoming more and more common. Where I live here in Oregon, they're starting to do that more and more commonly, have kids do it. And it doesn't have to be a ton of workout. 10 minutes is plenty. And I will tell
Yes.
you, I started doing that with my kids in my classroom. What a difference. In fact, I will never forget, I had this one kid named William in my classroom who had attention issues and all this stuff. And he was on medication. It didn't work because he was a foster kid. And I feel like probably his symptoms of attention issues were probably due to trauma growing up. And very often medication doesn't work for kids whose attention issues are the result of trauma. So, in fact, on my website, I have a whole course on how to raise children who have experienced trauma, or it's raising successful kids who have experienced trauma, because it's a whole different ball of wax. And a lot of kids have experienced, they've had something happen in their lives and they get triggered. How do you help them get out of that trigger and live life, right?
Right.
So, one of the things that's really helpful is exercise. So one day we had to go to an assembly, a school assembly in the morning. So we missed our 10-minute workout in the morning. And we came back and I'm thinking, okay, we got to make up for lost time. I'm going to just start right into this math thing that we're doing. And okay, let's go, 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 people. And I look out at them and they're all like glassy eyed and staring off. And and I was like, who are you people? And what'd you do with my students? Where's my class? And William says, oh, Mrs. Wilkinson, we didn't get to do our exercise today. And I said, you're right, buddy. Everybody stand up, because that 10 minutes saved so much
Wow.
time because they were
Hmm.
awake. Their brains, all of their chemicals and neural pathways, your brain is just full of operations all the time. And that 10 minutes lasts for 4 hours. So if they get a
Mm.
little bit of exercise, and it's not enough for them to get smelly or stinky. So, and I didn't have a lot of teachers. My kids didn't have a lot of teachers who were doing that in the morning. So I would have my own kids who had issues. So I knew they needed to move, right? So part of our getting ready in the morning was doing some kind of movement in the morning. So we'd jump rope or turn on the music and dance while we were getting ready for, I was getting ready for work and they were getting ready for school. We would just do something simple and I had them choose whatever they wanted to do that morning. And sometimes they'd be like, oh, I'm tired and I don't want to. And I said, I know, I don't blame you. Me too. So which one are we going to do? Because we know how important this is and what a difference it makes. So they're like, okay, and now you can pick like 10-minute videos on YouTube. There's a
I know.
bazillion opportunities now. Whereas we had to make a lot of stuff up because my youngest is turning 30 and my oldest is 32. So it was a while ago. We didn't have all these things were just coming in, right? So now, I mean, just everything is at your fingertips. So you can just have your kids pick. So if you have a school doing the prepare, purpose, process, empowered school program, that's awesome. They do it. But if you're a parent and you would like your kids their brains to be ready to learn in the morning, then have them get a drink of water and do a little exercise. We also used
All
to
right,
do,
let's look at those
okay.
three P's that you just mentioned, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I think in the audience, if they're taking notes like I am, they're like, what does this mean? I want to know. I want to know. So let's just jump into that and how parents can do it, and because obvious it's set up perfectly for schools, but how can a parent do it, and how can they help themselves do that?
So, what I did, because we had issues in our household, but what I did, how I started it, and I had girls, so maybe that was a little easier because I just started music and started dancing around. They're like, Mom, it's too early in the morning. What are you doing? And I was like, we're going to have a great day. And we used to like to play The Best Day of My Life. I don't know if you remember, dun, dun,
Yeah,
dun,
yeah,
dun, 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 na, 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 na. Anyway, we would just play happy music in the morning. And now that's something that's super easy too, because you can go on one of these streaming services and just pick a theme for your music,
I know.
happy dance music. Put it on in the morning and it'll give you a whole bunch of different songs. So they don't play the same ones over and over again. And, we would just dance around the house. And that's how I started it. And then we started talking about jumping rope and how that rhythm helped the kids in my class. And I said, you know what? I mean, jumping rope is something you can do for just a couple of minutes and get so much bang for your buck. You don't have to do it for 10 minutes and still get just a lot of benefits. It's one of those things like running or, certain kinds of exercise that we do, we just can do less of it and get all the benefits, if that makes sense. And jump rope
Yes.
was one of those things, and they didn't have to go far. And we lived in San Diego. So the weather was nice enough that they could go out on the patio and just, jump 100 times. And then they got to where they were trying to jump 100 times without missing. And, just little games that they would play like that. But then by the time they went to school, they were wide awake and just feeling so much better, just happier, upbeat, and ready to learn. And the
So
other thing we
prepare for
did,
them is not only the water, but it's the exercise as well that's stimulating to
absolutely.
so they're
Absolutely.
replenishing their mind with water, kind of getting it lubricated.
Well,
Let's
it's
look at
kind
it
of
like a
like we need
car. Yeah.
breakfast in the morning. People skip breakfast, but that's how our metabolism starts. And that's how
Hmm.
our brain starts, especially for kids. And they're eating all this sugar in the morning. So the parents think that they're awake when they're on their way out the door. And then they do that 20-minute crash. Then they have the 20-minute sugar crash. I mean, even bagels are, processed carbs. So they're like a big sugar bomb. So we used to eat things like there are certain protein bars we would eat, peanut butter and banana, apple slices and banana. And the kids learned to make that stuff themselves because I was getting ready for work too. So, and it was really, oh, another thing we did is we hard boiled eggs, like a whole, maybe 18 of them at the beginning of the week, because eggs are just this little ball. If your kids like eggs, oh, and we used to color them at all kinds of different times of the year. Because that just made it fun. They used to make some of the most fun eggs because we practice makes better, right? So we would color eggs and they would eat eggs in the morning. They learned to peel them themselves because eggs have so much nutrition in them. So if they're eating one or two eggs in the morning and maybe a half of an orange, and then drinking a glass of water, they're golden. So,
Mm.
just but keeping it simple for mom because moms are busy. Moms and dads are busy. So it's easy to say, oh, just pour, some Cocoa Puffs or whatever, sugar pebbles into a bowl. And here's the thing, a lot of times the kids leave the milk. The problem is that when they leave the milk, the vitamins are just sprayed on in the factory. So most of the vitamins go into the milk. So if they're not drinking the milk and the parents are like, yeah, well, that has mostly sugar into it anyway. Yeah, that's why they shouldn't be really eating that cereal. But if they are eating that cereal, they have to drink the milk, even though they're getting
Right.
sugar, because that's where the vitamins are. They've all soaked off the cereal and they're now in the milk. And,
Mm.
most parents don't know that. I didn't know that. For a long time, I had my kids eating various kinds of cereal. We used to love frosted mini wheats. They're little sugar bombs too, those little, but they're delicious. Anyway, but
Mm.
you get the idea. So those are some things that parents can do. Another thing, because I had a daughter who had anxiety and another daughter who had trouble focusing. And we would play little brain games in the morning. And when we played those little brain games, it would allow them to relax and and it was kind of almost a trigger for them to be able to think and focus. So we would
Hmm.
play this little game called Add a Move, where one of us would make a move and then we'd all make the same move. And then the next person would make another move. So, shake out your hands, then clap, then snap. Although as they got older, their moves got, really wild and complicated. And then, of course, I'm always the first one who would miss and they would crack up. They thought that was hilarious. But it calmed them. Like if they were feeling anxious in any way, it only takes 90 seconds to work through the cortisol in the brain and replace it with dopamine. There are all
Mm.
kinds of games, like quiet games you can play too, though. In fact, somewhere around here, I have this book. I didn't write it. I wish I did. It's called 101 Brain Breaks and Brain-Based Educational Activities. A lot of teachers are using this in their classroom now, but there's no reason you can't use this as a parent. And it
Yeah,
even tells you the
exactly.
different things that it does for your children's brain. Because one of the reasons I wrote Brain Stages is there are so many different philosophies about teaching, and there isn't the kind of consistency which I'm trying to change. If we could get all teachers to prepare kids' brains for learning and then to help kids figure out a purpose for whatever they're learning, that isn't just something like we can give them suggestions, but to brainstorm, how might you use this information in your life? How could this be important to you? And now we have Chat GBT. You can put in there, I have an 8-year-old daughter who likes to dance, and we have to do spelling. And how might spelling help a child who enjoys dancing? And if you give the prompt ahead of time to Chat GBT, you are an expert on discovering purpose for why children of any age with certain interests should be learning something, how they can use that in their lives, and it'll come up with 10 reasons.
So when you give a child a purpose on why they're learning, how does it change their view of what they're doing?
It's like a 180. So when they first feel like they're doing it for you, I am learning all this stuff from my parents and because I'm supposed to, and these are just the things that you do, then it becomes meaningful. Now they're thinking about it. Why am I learning? What am I going to do with this? And what's the point? And how can I use this? Because so much of teaching is teaching facts and getting them to learn facts and concepts about things. Whereas when they have a purpose, they start thinking about thinking and they start coming up with ideas. I mean, this is where critical thinking comes from.
Right.
And so when we developed a purpose for their learning, and then we would revisit that, okay, right before I would do something in the classroom, I'd say, okay, so think about your reason. Why are we learning this? How are you going to use this information? Because we also, at the very end of a lesson, a unit, a project, whatever we were working on, I would give them 5 minutes to write in a journal and say, what'd you learn? How are you going to use it?
You know, Trish, that's funny you say when you talked about the why there, that was the process that I was taught in college as part of our intro. You would put up on the prompt, why is this topic important? And then just let the students throw it out. So I was asked to teach a life class at my church. And this was many years ago. And I was only in my mid 20s, and there were people much older than me in the class. And so I used that approach. So they were introducing the topic. We were introducing the topic, and I could tell the group was not really into it. And so we went through the process of doing kind of a little intro activity, asking them why is it important to learn this, and then okay, now we understand why. What do we need to know about this next? And then coming up with the whats and having them do it. And then when we got through that class, there was an excitement about it. And the next week, there was 3 times as many people there because they had been out telling their friends and at the church, hey, you got to come to this. We're
Exactly.
doing some great things. And I was like, well, I'm on to something here. What
So
just
can
happened there?
you imagine if we did that in classrooms in school, James? And I've
Well,
done
that was the
this
way
with,
I was taught to teach.
well, that's wonderful because that's not the norm. And I think you would find that very few teachers are having kids brainstorm like, why are we learning this and what are you going to do with it? And So what does that look like? And what did you learn now? And I would check in with them. So we just learned this and this. How might you use that? And we just take a couple of minutes to do that. And, popcorn, have kids tell us what they were doing and how we were doing it. Kind of like what you're talking about, what you did with adults, right? Huge, huge. It's like a 180. You go from
And
kids who
the
don't
thing
want to
about doing that,
think, they just want you to hand them the information. They do the minimum and then they get insulted when the teacher asks them to do more, because they don't have any skin in the game. There's no purpose for them. They're learning it pretty much out of context. But when
and
they
when I
have
was doing the
purpose,
Watts, when I was doing the Watts, after a while of doing it, you could guide them to give you the Watts that you already had in your plan to do.
right.
You could guide them, but occasionally they would come up with a Watt that was not in my plan, and I would take a step back after the class was over, and I would go, "That's better than we need to go there."
Yeah.
Now, I
I
admit
learned
that
so
when I
much.
first started teaching,
Right.
they did not have the demands of following, my curriculum did not have the demands of following everything so precise that if you deviate from it, you're, going to get scolded from it by the powers that be. So a lot of teachers now feel they can't do that, but I would look at it and we would actually arrange it too, Trish, is that, if I had the topics, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this, I would turn and say, these Watts are great. These are topics that we need to discuss. What order do you think we need to go about them first? And then I would get them to come up with it. And most of the time I could guide them to the route I wanted to take anyway. But I would get that buy-in that they thought it was their idea. We decided.
But also, it is
this.
also their idea because you come to kind of an agreement as the teacher or the parent, and a parent is a kind of teacher, right?
Yes.
As we are that role for the children in our lives, they also come up with things on their own. So they are coming up on their own, even though we're guiding them. And sometimes, like you say, the kids came up with ideas that, I would always come up with ideas ahead of time. And especially if you're doing this for a while, you just get quick at it because practice makes better, right? So being able to do that as a parent and a teacher, and I first started doing that with my kids doing their homework. They would be looking at their math and going, why do I have to know this? I'm never going to use this. Why would I have, and how many times have all of us felt that way about something we were doing that didn't come easily, that we weren't terribly interested in? But part of the reason we weren't interested is we didn't have a reason to learn it. There was no,
right.
Purpose makes all the in all of our lives. When we have purpose in our lives for anything we're doing, it just absolutely changes the game. So, and that's true for parents. Like I would do that when we would have discussions. I have a whole problem solving thing on my website too. I have a family success course. And one of the parts of that family success course is a problem solving portion of it that talks about going through different steps. Okay, you're seeing some behaviors in your child that just aren't working, and you just have some things going on in your dynamic. So how do you recreate that instead of everybody suffering for it and your kids having these big stories when they're adults? And, my parents ruined me in this way or that way when they grow up, right? Because you just didn't know what you didn't know. You didn't know how to fix it. So,
and then how do we jump to the process then? I mean, what is that portion of it too? And the reason I'm jumping to that is because now you've got me. I got a class that I'm teaching on coaching, youth life coaches next week, and I'm looking at this going, maybe we need to add a component of using these 3 Ps at the beginning. So I want you to talk to me about the process here because I'm taking more notes than probably the audience is right now.
Right. So. Well, so we already talked about prepare. Do something to prepare their brains for learning because their brains have been sleeping. It used to be in school, by the time kids got to school, they walked to school or rode their bikes or whatever, and they had some exercise or they were there early, so they played on the playground. Now there isn't nearly as much of that. So if we can get them to move before they get to start to think, that's good for 4 hours. And if you do that a couple times a day, it saves so much time. It's crazy how much time. So even if you're working with older people, and you're training other people, just having them play some, funny little physical games or whatever. Like we used to do head and shoulders, knees and toes, and we do it in English and Spanish because I had both languages that I was teaching most of the time. And because I was in East LA and South County, San Diego, when I was teaching. And so we would start slowly, head and shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. And then we go faster, 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 faster till we were going head and shoulders, knees and toes. And then we would switch and do Spanish. And then we would do other parts of the body, shoulders, chest, and hips and legs, head and shoulders, knees and toes, knees and... So they would learn all the body parts, and we'd start practicing in English and Spanish. So they were getting, so both sets of kids were getting new vocabulary. So there was much more unity in the room because they were starting to identify with each other and both recognizing words, kind of thing. And so just doing something physical and then maybe doing a brain game to kind of calm them down so they can calm down and think, maybe do a little bit of deep breathing or whatever, and then have them have a purpose for what they're learning, go through that process of brainstorming. And then we would brainstorm all this stuff, write it down. Now I'm having teachers also use ChatGPT because the kids love that, because we're all, ooh, AI, we shouldn't be using AI. And the problem is AI is here to stay. So what if we learn positive things to do with AI? And one of those positive things is to help kids figure things out for themselves. So AI will give them 10 reasons that they might want to learn something, 10 reasons to learn something. And then they can look at all those reasons and go, I don't really like any of those, but I think this could apply to this or that I'm thinking. And they come up with something on their own. But the idea is to have whoever you're working with come up with reasons that resonate with them, come up with a purpose for learning whatever you're working on that resonates with them, that isn't our reason as a teacher, unless, we can guide them that way because there are certain things we want them to learn, but also to give them the freedom to look at other avenues and other reasons and other ways that they may use that information, because all it does is enrich the group. And the third part that we haven't spoken about yet, after they come up with a purpose, and you're talking about why and what. So what are we going to do now that we know the why? What are some specific things we can do with this? The last thing is, when they're done, to process it. And we don't do that enough in our society because we're so hurry, 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 hurry.
Now, what do you mean by process it?
So our brains need to process what we learn. And when we skip this step, it means we have to go over something 25 times or whatever the number is that they keep publishing. Well, and they have to practice this 25 times. Part of the reason is because we don't give kids a chance to process what they learn. So after we've worked on something, then I would say to them, okay, write in your journal for 5 minutes, write about what you learned and how you're going to use it. And then they would get different partners in the classroom all the time, because I wanted them all to get to know each other, all of them, which created such a cohesive community. They went from, knocking heads all the time and competing and whatever to becoming this cohesive community. And I'd say, guys, if you want to compete in your learning, compete, with other schools or whatever. We're all a team here. We're on the same team. And if we're playing football or soccer or whatever game that you like to play, and we're competing against each other instead of working together, we're probably not going to win. It's something we have to do. This is something we need to do together. So it created this really cohesive community. So they would share what they learned out loud to a partner. And using and you'd hear around the room in the beginning of the school year, I'd hear kids go, hey, or one kid would go, hey, I didn't even think of that. I'm going to add that to my journal. And then I'd hear another kid say, you can't add that to your journal. That was my idea. And I'd say, you don't want to be a leader? And they'd say, what do you mean? I'd say, that's literally what a leader means. Somebody sees something you're doing or respects your thoughts or how you behave or whatever, and they want to follow you. That's literally what a leader is. So you don't want to be a leader? You don't want other people to, oh no, you can add that to your journal. That's what I'd hear next. Oh, okay, Guy, I didn't think of that. Yeah, I'm sorry. You can write that in your journal. And then it got to be to where it became a game with them. Oh, I didn't think of that. I'm going to add that to my journal too. And then we would share out in the class depending on how much time we had. But I'm telling you, these things save so much time because we didn't have to redo the same stuff over and over and over again. We could apply what we learned. So we're using those skills, but we're using those skills in other ways. I mean, it's doing these three P's, it's magical. And it's just because it's how our brains process. Does that make sense? Our
It does.
brains, if we're just having it log certain facts or whatever in parts of the brain, it may or may not be able to retrieve it or apply it. But if they've assigned a purpose to what they're learning, and then they've had a chance to process it and discuss it with someone else, and they've had the added activity of being able to write it down. We never cared about punctuation or spelling or anything in these journals. It was just basically writing notes. So we would have them write notes. So they were using all these different senses, and it allows the brain to store information and skills and concepts and applications in context. And the whole thing that's been missing is context. And especially when they create their own
Yeah.
context because they come up with their own purpose and then they do their own processing. And they'd come in and I would give them popsicle sticks for running around the track. And they would get so many popsicle sticks and they do tally marks in the classroom. So that's how they learned to do tally marks and all this stuff. Well, I would give them an extra stick so they'd have to run one less lap if they would come in and say, "Hey, Mrs. Wilkinson, I used this and this skill yesterday in the grocery store," or I was doing this on my homework and I realized that this was similar to this, or we
Hmm.
were doing something in the yard, in the kitchen, I was helping my dad. I mean, just all kinds of different things. My mom and I were doing this project, and they would come up with ways that so and so was having an argument and I talked to them about what we learned in social studies. I mean, they just came up with all kinds of different ways that they were applying what they were learning in school, and it became like a game to them. And it was, people can say whatever they want. I saved so much time by using these three: prepare, purpose, process practices in the classroom. It's not a curriculum, it's just kind of a habit or the way of doing things. And
And when you were going through them, I was thinking back to my own experience of being in the classroom and my wife's and now my daughter's. We did all these, a lot of it because through experience and trial and error, we figured out that was what was working. But you've thought deeper into it, seen the science behind it, and connected it all together in a pathway that people can understand it
so any
in a
teacher
way.
can do it. That's the
Yes.
idea.
Well, and not
Any
only that, I
teacher
mean,
can
just
do it.
a parent that wants to teach a concept, wants to teach a value, wants to teach character traits there, wants to explain to them what their family stands for and what being a part of who we are. All this can be applied to this.
Absolutely.
This is our group is those who are sticking with us are. I think people are getting excited on what you're hearing right now because this is from someone who's been in the classroom. This is work. This works.
Oh, this were they used to put proctors in my classroom every year to prove I wasn't cheating. It definitely works. And they would, and when this first started happening, I was teaching next door to one of the best teachers in the district. He was amazing. And I was very intimidated because it was the first time I was ever teaching fourth grade. And he had gotten all the parent requests. So I had all the rest of the kids in my fourth grade class. And I just thought, while I don't want to crash and burn, and I love this age group, but I've never actually taught 9 and 10-year-olds before. So I just wasn't sure how it was all going to work. And then when my scores just blew his away, they were like, the first thing they thought was, we better put a proctor in her class. They didn't ask me what I was doing. They just thought they should put a proctor in my classroom. And then
Of
later,
course, they didn't ask you what you were doing because they know what they're okay. We
right.
won't go
But
there.
I mean, and I don't fault them. I mean, I understand how they made that leap. How did she, with her class versus this other person's class, how did
Hmm.
her scores come in ahead of his? And he's one of the best teachers we know. I mean, he's retired now, but he was awesome. My own daughter had him. I had immense respect for him. He was an amazing teacher. So, and I didn't know that what I was doing was going to work on this level. I had no idea that we were just going to blow the doors off because
Mm,
it was an experiment for me. What I knew is that teaching was fun again.
mm.
And after we did them for a while, we put the kids in charge. I put the kids in charge of doing the practices. So
Wow.
it would be one of the kids in the classroom who would decide what physical activity we were going to do that morning, and they would run it. So it created this kind of leadership. And at first they were, nervous about it and shy. And you can't even believe how some of the quiet kids came out and the confidence that came out of that. And there would be somebody in charge of water. You guys remember to get a drink of water at recess time, or whatever. And I would encourage them to drink water bottles. And that took some adjusting because I had a lot of kids running to the bathroom at first. Because, I just knew that they needed water. I knew my own kids needed water. I didn't know how to organize it so it would work in the classroom. So the first week it was a little harrowing, but, we figured it out. It wasn't a big
Yeah.
deal. We started
So
talking about it.
how can our audience connect more with you so that they can learn a little bit more about this, see some of the examples of it, and integrate it in their in their life, whether or not they're a professional teacher or parent or
Or
a coach.
homeschoolers. I also work with a
Yeah.
homeschooling group. Yeah, for sure.
So how can they connect with you best?
So go to thebrainstages.com. And if you go to the Empowered School tab, it'll talk more about the three prepare, purpose, process practices. And then I also have groups that I work with, whether you're a teacher, a parent, or social work, whatever you're doing, with kids. And right now I'm collecting data. So I haven't even been charging to do the empowered school thing. So if you're interested in doing that right now, from now until the end of the year, I'm running free groups to help people integrate these three practices. And won't it be amazing? Because my idea is to collect data and be able to get a grant and start just spreading this across the nation. And I'm sure it will modify in time or whatever, but this is how our brains develop, function, and learn. So if we can prepare children's brains for learning, it works for workers too, though. Like if you're a CEO and you want to have more productivity out of your staff and that kind of thing, if you prepare their brains to get ready and do their best thinking, if they're clear on the purpose and the vision of the company and what they're doing, if they're a bricklayer, but their big thing is they're actually creating this monumental building that's going to be used for whatever, showing them the purpose instead of just focusing on laying the bricks, if that makes sense. So creating the vision, sharing the vision, and then allowing them to process. So they have a purpose, they have a process. Okay, now we've been doing this for a while. Let's check in and see how you're doing. What have you learned so far? How are you using it? How do you feel like you're a part of this? If it's a family, how do you feel like what do you think your place is in this family?
Hmm.
How do your qualities benefit this family? And if it's academically, what did you learn and how are you going to use it? If it's in a business situation, it's how do you see your part in what you're doing and are you getting your needs met? And how can we support this going even grander than it is now? Just kind of doing the checkup. So it works for everything. And I know I'm supposed to narrow my focus and all of that stuff. But the bottom line is, this is just how our brains develop, function, and learn. And our brains are fully developed between 25 and 27 years old. Oh, one thing before we go that I want to say to parents, if parents are listening and teachers, whoever, when your kids stare off into space, it is not because they are bored and they don't want to pay attention and they're not doing whatever. We have this thing in our brain called the default mode network that was identified in, I think it was 2001. So it's only been around for like 25 years and it has all these functions, but your brain has to do a whole bunch of things. It never shuts down because we have to do things like breathe. Our heart has to be, there are a lot of things that our bodies are doing. And when kids get a lot of input, our brains literally reboot. When they're staring out the window and they're not listening to you anymore, it's because that's where their brains are and they'll come back as soon as they can. Like when I would notice my kids starting to space out in my classroom, or even my own kids, that's when we would play a brain game. And more teachers are starting to do that. They call them brain breaks. But it's, just helping kids to reboot their brains and be able to think again. So, and that's really important to know if you're a speaker in an audience, or like you're talking about doing this thing with a group of people. We have a thing called a default mode network. And when our brains get saturated, they need to reboot. And it's not exactly the same as a computer, because you don't turn it off and turn it on. You can't do that. But if you just give it a little chance to, sometimes it's as simple as, I just learned recently from a teacher. She'd say, okay, you're going to pretend you have a flower on one shoulder and you're blowing out your birthday candles on the other shoulder. So you're going to sniff on one side and roll your neck, and you're going to blow out the candles on the other side, which is just a fun way to get kids to do a little bit of deep breathing. But
I like that.
But it reboots their brain, and it only takes like 4 breaths and they're good.
I like that. Well, Trish, thank you. Thank you for being a part of the summit, enriching that experience for the participants that was there. And this episode is really packed full of content. So thank you so much for being willing to share your experiences and your life experiences with our audience. I so appreciate that.
Well, thanks for having me, because as you can tell, I'm a little passionate about this.
I would have never figured that out. I would never figured that out. And listen, audience, if you've stuck with us this long, you've obviously found some value in what we're talking about. So please like and comment. But the most important thing that I want you to do is share, because someone that you know needs to hear this message, and they don't know about this show. They don't know about this episode. So please share this episode with someone so that it can reach the audience that it needs to reach. Thank you again, Trish. Thank you, audience. And we'll see everybody back here again really soon on the Generation Youth Podcast.